Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I picked up 9-year-old Haley from school, took her to ballet, waited an hour and a half in the hallway in an uncomfortable plastic chair, then took her home, made a snack, and checked her homework. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, the schedule was different, but the essence was the same. I was babysitter, housekeeper, and cook. When everyone left, I slowly cleaned up the kitchen, washed dishes, wiped down countertops. Amanda didn't like clutter and often reminded me that she'd taken me in out of grace after Harold, my husband, and Wesley's father had died. "Your pension is too small to live on your own," she used to say. "We need help with the kids," Wesley used to say. And I believed I did. The morning stretched on with the usual chores. I dusted, did the laundry, peeled vegetables for dinner. Sometimes I stopped at the window, looking out at the neighbor's yard. There grew an old magnolia tree that stood bare now, but was soon to bloom. It always seemed to me that time flowed differently in that house, slower, dragging like cooling molasses. In the afternoon, I picked Haley up from school. She was as quiet as she'd been lately. "How was your day, sunshine?" I asked as we walked to the bus stop. "Fine," she mumbled, not taking her eyes off the phone. Amanda had given her the phone for her last birthday, and her granddaughter had barely spoken to me since then. On the bus, she had her headphones on, shutting herself off from the world and from me. I stared at her reflection in the window blonde hair pulled back in a careless ponytail, a scattering of freckles on her nose. She looked so much like my youngest son Wesley when he was little, before he became like this. After the ballet, Haley refused the snack I'd made. "I'm on a diet, Grandma," she said in a tone she'd probably borrowed from her mother. "Mom says your food has too many carbohydrates." I put the plate of sandwiches in the refrigerator. Maybe Wesley would eat them tonight, though I doubted it. He rarely ate anything I cooked, preferring to order food from restaurants. That evening, as I cooked dinner, I thought about the call from Vanessa, my daughter. She hadn't called in 2 weeks, even though she had promised to contact me every weekend. The last time she talked about her new position, her promotion, how busy she and her husband are. She mentioned her grandchildren, twins Emma and Evan, in passing, saying only that they were healthy and doing well in school. When I asked to speak to them, Vanessa said they were at practice. I knew that wasn't true. It was Sunday morning and there was no way they had any practice. The older son, Tobias, called even less often. The last time I heard his voice was at Christmas 5 months ago. He sent a card and a check for $100. "For your needs, Mom." Wesley took the money. "For your keep, Mom." I was stirring spaghetti sauce when I heard the front door slam. Wesley was back earlier than usual, and I could tell by his heavy footsteps that he was in a bad mood. "What's for dinner?" he mumbled, entering the kitchen and opening the refrigerator in search of beer. "Spaghetti bolognese," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. "Your favorite." "I told you not to make pasta on weekdays. Amanda's on a diet, I'm gaining weight, and the kids—" He waved his hand, opening a can of beer. "Anyway, Amanda's running late today. She has a meeting with a client. The kids are eating at a friend's house, so you don't have to try so hard." I silently continued stirring the sauce. The food, the time, the effort, the wasted food was in front of my eyes. The thing that hurt me the most was that no one had even warned me that they wouldn't have dinner at home. "Okay, save some for tomorrow." Wesley sighed, noticing my face. "Don't look like that. You know how it is. Plans change." "Sure." I tried to smile. "Are you hungry? I can set the table." "I'll order something." He was already dialing on his phone. "Would you like a burrito?" I shook my head. My appetite was gone. The kids were back by 8 p.m., and Amanda was back by 9. To my surprise, they decided to have dinner together after all. Amanda heated up the spaghetti I'd made, and everyone sat down to eat. I joined them, though I usually ate separately in the kitchen when everyone was done. "Grandma, is it true you used to be a nurse?" Haley asked, twirling spaghetti on her fork. I blinked in surprise. My grandchildren were rarely interested in my life before they were born. "Yes, sunshine. 27 years at St. Mary's." "Why did you stop working?" "When your grandfather got sick, I had to take care of him." "And after he died?" Haley looked at me curiously. "Haley, don't bother your grandmother with stupid questions," Wesley interjected. "Mom's too old to work." I'm only 67, I said quietly. A lot of people my age are still working. Sure, Mom. Wesley rolled his eyes. But who would hire you? You said yourself that everything has changed. New technologies, new methods. You'd have to retrain. And at your age… Can I have some more sauce? Josh interrupted him, holding out a plate. I reached for the sauce pot in the center of the table. I don't know if it was my handshaking or my distance, but it tipped over. The thick red sauce spread across the tablecloth and dripped onto the floor right onto the new cream carpet Amanda had bought last week. Damn it, Mom! Wesley jumped up, knocking over a chair. Do you even look at what you're doing sometimes? My new carpet! Amanda was already running into the kitchen to get a rag. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I grabbed the napkins, trying to pick up the sauce, but only smearing it more. Get your hands off me! You're making it worse! Wesley pushed me aside. God, I'm so tired of this! Of you! Amanda came back with a rag and some cleaner. She started scrubbing at the stain, muttering something about how the carpet was now hopelessly ruined. I can try to get the stain out, I said in a shaky voice. When I worked at the hospital, we used to do a lot of… What does this have to do with your hospital? Wesley turned to me, his face contorted with anger. You're not a nurse anymore, Mom. You're nothing. Just a liability who can't even serve gravy without disaster. Silence hung in the room. The children froze, not daring to move. Amanda stopped rubbing the carpet. Wesley, I began, but he interrupted me. No, I'm serious. You live in my house, eat my food, spend my money. And what do we get in return? Spoiled things, oversalted food, and your constant sighing and complaining about your health. I've never complained, I whispered. Because you know no one cares. He was almost shouting now. Do you know what I think sometimes? That it would be easier if you just die. Yeah, just die for all I care. Wesley! Amanda pulled him back, casting a startled look at the children. But I couldn't hear anything anymore. My ears were ringing and my eyes were a blur. I slowly got up from the table and walked out of the room. No one called out to me. No one stopped me. In my closet room, I pulled an old suitcase out from under my bed, the same one I'd moved here with 4 years ago. I put away a few things: 2 pairs of pants, a few blouses, underwear, a warm sweater, a framed picture of Harold, an album with pictures of the kids when they were little, a box of jewelry, the wedding ring, the earrings Harold had given me for my 30th wedding anniversary, a brooch from my mother. I pulled an envelope out of the nightstand where I kept the money Tobias sent me for birthdays and holidays. Wesley thought he'd taken it all, but I'd learned to hide some of it. It wasn't much, $972. That should be enough for the first time. When I left the room with the suitcase, Haley was standing in the hallway. Grandma, where are you going? She asked, scared. I have to leave, sweetie. I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't do it. For good? I didn't know what to say, so I just stroked her head and walked past her. In the living room, Wesley was still helping Amanda scrub the carpet. He looked up when I walked in with the suitcase. What's this? Where are you going? His tone was irritated, but I could detect a note of concern. Leaving, I said simply. Don't be silly, Mom. Where are you going? I don't know, but I can't stay here any longer. Because of one sentence? He stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. That's not what I meant. You know how hot I get. I'm leaving, I repeated firmly. Wesley looked at Amanda, as if seeking support, but she turned away, continuing to rub the carpet. You have no idea what it's like to survive out there alone, he said softer. Why don't you sleep in the guest room, and we'll talk about it in the morning? I was wrong, I admit. I shook my head and headed for the door. He didn't try to stop me physically, just stood there looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite make out. A mixture of annoyance, distrust, and maybe relief. You'll be back, he said into my back. Where will you go? I didn't answer. I closed the door behind me and walked slowly down the porch steps. It was early May, the evening was warm, but I was chilly. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay. I reached the corner of the street and stopped, looking back at the Wesley house. The windows glowed with a warm light, and inside was my family. My son, my daughter-in-law, my grandchildren. The people I'd lived for the last few years. and who had just made me realize how alone I really was. For the first 3 days, I lived in a cheap motel on the outskirts of Abilene. The room smelled of chlorine and cigarettes, but it was clean, and I didn't need much more than that. At night, I lay awake, listening to the sound of trucks on the highway, thinking about the most reckless thing I'd ever done. 67 years old, and here I was, no house, almost no money, no plan. On the fourth day, I found an ad in the newspaper left by the previous tenant. One-bedroom apartment for rent in a quiet neighborhood, second floor, for one person, no pets. The price was almost half the market price, which immediately alerted me. But I had no choice. The house was an old two-story red brick building on a quiet street in a neighborhood that had seen better days back in the 70s. The paint on the shutters was peeling, and one of the porch steps was rotten, but the front lawn was neatly mowed, and there were pots of geraniums by the front door. The landlady, Mrs. Patterson, was a gaunt woman in her 80s with a sharp eye and a determined chin. "It's on the second floor," she said as she slowly climbed the stairs. "There's no elevator, as you can see. I hope you can walk up the stairs on your own." "Quite," I assured her. "There are only 4 apartments, 2 per floor. The neighbors are quiet. Mr. Prince lives across the hall, retired. There's me downstairs and one other apartment that's empty at the moment. No intercom, mail's in the boxes out front. First and last month's rent in advance. The apartment was small but clean, a kitchenette combined with a living room, a bedroom a little bigger than a closet, and a bathroom you could barely turn around in. The furniture was old but good, sofa, coffee table, bookshelf, bed. The windows had faded floral curtains. "I'll take it," I said without thinking. Mrs. Patterson looked at me carefully. "Are you alone? No husband, no children?" "I am." "And you work?" I hesitated. "I'm retired. I was a nurse." She nodded, as if that explained everything. A nurse's pension wasn't much, but it should be enough for this apartment. An hour later, I was officially a resident of number 147 Maple Street. Mrs. Patterson gave me the keys and a copy of the one-paragraph house rules. Do not disturb the neighbors. It wasn't hard. I'd spent my whole life trying not to bother anyone. The first night in my new place, I sat on the couch, looking at the empty walls. There was no TV, no radio, not even a clock. Only silence, occasionally broken by the creak of floorboards in the corridor or the noise of a passing car. It was unusual not to hear children's voices, not to think about making dinner, checking homework, ironing someone's shirts. The next morning, I woke up at 7, unusually late for me. The sun was already streaming through the thin curtains, painting patterns on the faded wallpaper. I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to make a plan for the day. What do people who have no responsibilities to others do? What do they fill their time with? Later, sitting on the porch with a cup of instant coffee, the only thing I bought yesterday at the corner store besides bread and cheese, I noticed an older man coming out of the neighboring driveway. He was tall and gaunt, with a wispy gray beard and deep wrinkles furrowing his face. When he noticed me, he lifted his tattered cap in a gesture of greeting. "You must be the new neighbor," he said in a husky voice. "Dexter Prince." "Ethel Ludlow." I nodded slightly. "An escape or a new beginning?" he asked without preamble. "I beg your pardon?" "People move into this hole for 2 reasons. Either they're running away from something or they're starting over. You can't have it both ways." I paused, thinking about my answer. "Probably both." He grinned, revealing rare teeth. "Honestly, I like it. Well, welcome to purgatory, Mrs. Ludlow." "Miss," I corrected automatically. "I mean, I'm a widow. Like most of us at our age." He lifted his cap again. "Well, I'll leave you to it. If you need help, I'm across the hall. Just knock louder. I sometimes take my hearing aid off." He stepped off the porch and headed toward the garages at the back of the yard. I finished my coffee, pondering the strange conversation. Dexter Prince wasn't like the people I usually socialized with. Straightforward, a little gruff. But at the same time, he had a sincerity I'd been missing for a long time. The days stretched on, one after another, similar and different at the same time. I went to the nearest supermarket, cooked simple meals, read old magazines left by the previous tenants. Sometimes I sat on the porch, watching the occasional passerby. I saw Dexter almost every day, He was often tinkering in his garage, sometimes nodding at me, but we never spoke again. On the seventh day of my new life, it rained. Not a light spring rain, but a real downpour with a thunderstorm. I was standing at the window, watching the water pour down the street, when I noticed Dexter running from the garages to the house. He was limping and clearly struggling to cover the distance. Without thinking, I grabbed my umbrella and ran up the stairs. "Mr. Prince!" I shouted, swinging open the front door. "Wait!" He turned around, squinting against the rain. I ran over and covered us both with an umbrella. "Thanks," he mumbled when we reached the porch. "Damn weather. Damn foot." "You're soaked," I remarked. "I have tea." He glanced at me as if evaluating the offer. "I have bourbon. It warms you up better." That was the first time I'd been in Dexter Prince's apartment. It was like mine, but from a different era. Massive wooden furniture, old framed photographs, bookshelves filled with tattered volumes. "Have a seat," he pointed to a chair. "Just put that cushion away, it's just for show." I sat down, carefully holding the glass of amber liquid. Dexter sat across from me, stretching out his leg with a grunt. "Knee?" I asked. "Hip. An old injury from the Vietnam era. It hurts like hell in this weather." "I have some ointment that might help," I said. I was a nurse. "And I was a truck driver," he chuckled. 32 years behind the wheel. "Seen a lot?" "All over the country, twice. Best education a man can get." We got to talking. Dexter talked about places he'd been, people he'd met on the road. I talked about my work at the hospital, patients I remembered even years later. We didn't talk about families, and I was grateful for that. "What do you do in the garage?" I asked when the conversation started to dry up. "I'm trying to sort through the junk I've accumulated in my life. My wife, Martha, was always nagging me about bringing home junk after she died." He was silent for a moment. "So I decided to clean up, throw out what I don't need anymore." "Any luck?" "None," he grinned. "Every time I think I'll throw out this junk today. And then I look at some old chair and think, it can still be repaired. It's been like that for 5 years. Maybe you need some help." I suggested it. "I have a lot of free time." He looked at me questioningly. "Do you really want to go through other people's junk?" "Why not? I need something to keep my hands busy." The next day, when the rain stopped, Dexter showed me his garage. It was a rain of chaos, old furniture, toolboxes, parts from something that might have once been a car. In the corner was a workbench littered with screwdrivers, hammers, cans of paint. "Here," Dexter said, pointing to a chair with a broken leg. "You can start with that if you want. Tools over there, glue in that can. If it works, it's yours." I took the chair and examined it closely. Oak, early 20th century carved back. Good work, just neglected. "Do you have any sandpaper?" I asked. Dexter rummaged through a drawer and handed me several sheets. "I didn't expect you to know what to do with it." "I grew up on a farm," I answered. "My father taught me how to fix things." I got to work, first cleaning the chair of old paint and dirt. Then I glued the leg back together with small nails, sanded the wood until it was smooth under my fingers. There was something soothing about this work, methodical, demanding, but not too difficult. Dexter peeked in occasionally, but he didn't interfere, only occasionally offering advice or bringing tools that might come in handy. On the third day, I found a jar of walnut-colored stain. "May I?" I asked. "Go ahead," he shrugged. "It won't get any worse." By the end of the week, the chair was ready, polished, with a new seat upholstery I'd made from an old pillowcase I'd found in one of the boxes. It looked beautiful. Not new, of course, but with character, history. "Not bad," Dexter said, looking at the result. "Not bad at all. Have you ever done restoration before?" "No, never." "You have talent." He nodded to the far corner of the garage. "There's a dresser over there. The drawers are jammed, the hardware is missing, if you'd like." I wanted to. There was something meditative about working with wood. When I sanded an old surface, stripping away layers of paint and varnish, exposing the structure of the wood, I felt like I was doing the same thing to myself, stripping away the layers of years, habits, other people's expectations, getting to the core. The dresser was more complicated than the chair. I had to take it completely apart, clean the drawer guides, replace some parts. Dexter showed me how to make new handles out of old door hinges. Unusual, but effective. We should show it to Laureen, he said when the dresser was ready. Who's Laureen? She owns an antique store on Main Street. She's always looking for stuff like this. She says it's vintage right now. Do you think this dresser would sell? I looked at my work with doubt. I'm sure it could, and for good money. The next day, we loaded the dresser into Dexter's pickup truck and drove it to Past Lives, a small store filled with antique furniture, paintings, porcelain figurines, and other items that some people consider junk and others consider treasures. Lauren Mayfield appeared to be a tall woman with a mop of gray hair gathered in a careless bun. She wore jeans, a man's shirt, and massive silver jewelry. "Dexter," she exclaimed when she saw us. "Long time no see." "Hi, Laureen. This is Ethel, my new neighbor. She has something for you." Laureen gave me an appraising look. "Nice to meet you, Ethel. What do you have in there?" We showed her the dresser. Laureen examined it closely, opening and closing drawers, running her hand over the surface. "Victorian, mid-19th century, walnut wood. A good job of restoration. Did you do it yourself?" I nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "First time?" "Really?" Lauren raised her eyebrows. "You definitely have a flair. Most people overdo it. Too much varnish, the wrong stain. And you kept the character of the thing." "Thank you." I felt myself blush at the unusual praise. "I'd like to commission it. I think we can put it up for $500. My commission is 20%. Would you agree?" I looked at Dexter, confused. He winked at me. "Go for it." "Yeah, sure." I still couldn't believe that someone would pay that kind of money for an old dresser I'd found in the garage. "Great." Laureen pulled out a contract form. "Fill it out here and here. And Ethel, if you have any more work like this, bring it in. There's a high demand for authentic restored pieces right now. When we left the store, I felt strange. Like something important had happened, but I hadn't quite realized what it was." "You just became a businesswoman." Dexter grinned, opening the door of the pickup. "I don't think one sale makes me a businesswoman. It's a start. I still have plenty of things in my garage waiting for your magic touch." That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. My mind was spinning with thoughts of the dresser, of Laureen's words, of possibilities I'd never thought of before. $400. That's what I'd get if the dresser sold. Not a fortune, of course, but it was money I'd earned myself, with my hands, with my skills. In the morning, I knocked on Dexter's door. "You said you had more furniture?" I asked when he opened it. He smiled, and his wrinkled face transformed. "Come on, I'll show you." Over the next 2 weeks, I restored a small desk, a set of dining room chairs, and a carved framed mirror. Laureen took them all and displayed them in her store. When the dresser sold, she called me. By then, I had already bought a cheap cell phone and invited me to tea. "You have a real gift," she said, pouring fragrant tea into porcelain cups. We quickly switched to you despite the age difference. "It's like you feel these things. You know what they need." "I just do what feels right," I replied. "That's where the talent lies." Laureen leaned back in her chair. "You know, I've been working with antiques for years. I've seen a lot of things restored. But rarely have I seen such care for the original, such an understanding of the soul of an object." "The soul of the object?" I couldn't help smiling. "Yes, exactly. Every object has its own history, its own character. A good restorer doesn't just fix it. He listens to what the object wants to tell him. And you're a good listener, Ethel." I thought about what she said. Did I really feel the soul of an old dresser or chair? I don't know. But I certainly felt the satisfaction of the work, of being able to turn something forgotten, broken into something valuable, beautiful, needed. "I have a suggestion," Laureen said, interrupting my musings. "There's a small workshop behind the store. I don't use it much. If you want, you can work there. There's more light than Dexter's garage, and the tools are professional." "Yeah, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Laureen smiled. "It's good for me too. The more good things you restore, the more I'll sell." Thus began my unexpected partnership with Lauren Mayfield. Every morning, I'd go to the workshop behind Past Lives. I worked on old dressers, tables, chairs that Lauren found at sales or received from customers. Sometimes I'd bring things from Dexter's garage. His supply seemed inexhaustible. I learned to distinguish between types of wood, eras, styles. I learned how to work different surfaces, how to select hardware, how to restore carvings. Lauren gave me books on restoration, sometimes showing me special techniques. But most of the time, I just went with my intuition, letting my hands do what felt right. One evening, coming home after a long day in the studio, I had a strange thought. I was happy. Not in the sense that I was happy when my children or grandchildren were born. Not in the sense that I was happy around Harold. It was a different feeling, a quiet satisfaction in the work I was doing for myself, from the realization that I could create something of value with my own hands, from realizing that at 67 I had discovered something new about myself. I thought of Wesley, of his words, "You're nothing." Those words had broken my heart then. Now I realized he was wrong. I wasn't a nobody. I was a restorer. I was a person who knew how to listen to the soul of things, as Lorene used to say. I was myself. For the first time in years. In the little apartment on Maple Street, in the workshop behind the antique store, in long conversations with Dexter and Lorene, it was as if I were shedding my old skin, like a snake, and discovering a new one underneath, brighter, more real. It had been a month since I'd left Wesley's house. The June sun was flooding my small apartment with soft morning light. I'd gotten used to waking up without an alarm clock at my own pace. Today was Sunday, the only day Lauren's store wasn't open, which meant the workshop was closed. I had my own little traditions for such days. A cup of real coffee instead of instant, a fresh bun from the bakery around the corner, a book I borrowed from the local library. I was sitting by the window watching the neighborhood kids race a ball on the front lawn when my phone vibrated. A message from Lauren. "The chair set is sold out. Come back tomorrow for the money. And grab those pictures you mentioned." I smiled. The chairs were a particularly difficult job. The wood was cracked from time, the upholstery had faded. I'd spent almost 2 weeks restoring them. And now someone appreciated my labor, wanted these chairs in their home. To my surprise, I started making a good living. Not a fortune, of course, but enough to pay the rent and buy groceries without dipping into my savings. Lorene said that if things kept going like this, we could organize a small exhibition of my work, maybe even put an ad in the local paper. Sometimes I thought about my family, about Wesley, Amanda, the kids. I wondered how they lived without me. Do they notice my absence or are they relieved? I didn't call them and they didn't call me. In the first few days, I checked my phone often, expecting to see missed calls or messages. Then I stopped. Dexter said I needed to cut the cord permanently. We often chatted in the evenings, sitting on the porch. Sometimes Lauren would join us. They were both older than me. Dexter was 72, Lauren 70, but I felt younger, freer around them. "Kids are like leeches," Dexter said, sipping his bourbon. "They suck the life out one drop at a time without even noticing." "Not all of them," Lorene objected. "My daughter in Portland calls every week just to ask how I'm doing." "I don't have kids," Dexter shook his head. "But if I did, I'd love them from a distance, a very long distance." I smiled as I listened to them. The guilt I felt for abandoning my family was slowly dulling. After all, hadn't they effectively pushed me out of their lives? That Sunday morning, I was just thinking about visiting my grandchildren when there was a knock at the door. A sharp, insistent knock. I flinched. No one ever came to my door unannounced. Lorene always called. Dexter knocked in a special way. 3 short beats, a pause, 2 more. I went to the door, feeling an incomprehensible unease. "Who's there?" "Open up, Mom." Wesley's voice. My heart skipped a beat. I slowly opened the door. He stood leaning against the door jamb, wearing a wrinkled shirt, stubble on his cheeks, and circles under his eyes. He smelled faintly of alcohol, even though it was only 11 in the morning. "Finally," he said, walking past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "It wasn't easy finding you." "Hello, Wesley." I closed the door, trying to deal with the sudden excitement. "How did you find me?" "Never mind." He looked around the room, his gaze growing more and more contemptuous. "Jesus, Mom, do you really live here?" "Yes," I straightened. "This is my house." He hummed and sank heavily onto the couch. "You could have at least called, said you were okay." We were worried. I looked at my son carefully. He avoided my gaze, tapping his fingers nervously on the armrest of the couch. Worried? I asked him again. In a month, none of you had tried to contact me. We didn't know where you were, he snapped at me. You just left without saying anything. I said I was leaving. You said, you'll come back wherever you go. He waved his hand as if to ward off my words. I was angry. You know my temper. I could say too much. I could say too much. He said it so easily, as if it wasn't his words that pushed me out of my life, as if they didn't make me realize how little I meant to my own family. Why did you come, Wesley? I asked bluntly. He fidgeted on the couch, then stood up abruptly and paced the room. Amanda left, he finally blurted out. Took the kids and went to her mother's. What? I slumped back in my chair. When? 2 weeks ago. After we fought. About what? He froze, then looked at me angrily. Because of you. She said she couldn't live with a man who kicked out his own mother, that I was a terrible son and would be a terrible father to her children, that she didn't want Josh and Haley to grow up thinking it was okay to treat their parents that way. I was silent, digesting the information. Amanda, who had always seemed cold and indifferent to me, was standing up for me. She's exaggerating, Wesley continued. I didn't kick you out, you left. And anyway, how many times can you remind me of one phrase you said in your heart? I apologized. You didn't apologize, Wesley. It doesn't matter. He sat down again, now on the edge of the couch, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. The point is, without you, the whole thing fell apart. The kids ask about Grandma all the time. Amanda says she's not coming back until I make up with you. So that's it. He didn't come because he missed me or was concerned for my well-being. He came because he needed his wife back. And what do you suggest? I asked. Come home. He looked at me almost pleadingly. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But we're a family. Families are supposed to stick together. Once upon a time, those words would have touched me to the core. Once I would have done anything to make my children happy, even if it meant sacrificing my own happiness. But something has changed this month. I've changed. I have my own life now, Wesley, I said calmly. I'm working. Working? He snorted. What? Who'd hire you at your age? I restore antique furniture for a store on Main Street. He stared at me in disbelief, then laughed. Mom, really? You're playing at being a craftswoman? That's not a real job. It is a real job. I felt anger rising inside. I make enough to pay my rent and live on my own. Here? He circled the room. In this doghouse? Mom, be realistic. You deserve better. With us, you had your own room, stability. I had a closet, Wesley. And what kind of stability is that when at any moment you can be told you'd rather be dead? He jumped up, his face contorted with anger. You're at it again. I told you it was a moment of weakness. You can't go on reproaching me with one phrase forever. It's not about one phrase. I stood up too, feeling the calm I'd been cultivating all month begin to crack. It's about the years of neglect, the way you talked to me, the way you looked at me, the way you made me feel like a burden in your house. It wasn't just once, Wesley. It was every day. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. God, Mom, you've always been so sensitive. Took everything to heart. I'm just a straight shooter saying what I think. And I'm saying what I think now, too. I said, I'm not coming back to your house. But the kids, I'd love to see Josh and Haley. They can come visit me. But I'm not going back to being a free babysitter and housekeeper. Wesley looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe it was the first time he'd seen a woman with her own desires and boundaries rather than a comfortable, compliant mother. You've been brainwashed here, he said at last. This Klapovnik, this work. You're out of your mind, Mom. On the contrary, Wesley, for the first time in a long time, I feel like myself. He shook his head, then suddenly darted over to the table where my papers were, grabbed the first folder he could find. What's this? He started going through the papers. All this talk about independence. You don't have any money, Mom. Where do you get the money to pay the rent, to live? I told you I work. I tried to take the folder from him, but he pushed my hand away. A sales contract? He pulled out a piece of paper. It's a piece of land in Taylor County. That's Grandpa's land. You sold Grandpa's land? I sighed. It was bound to come out sooner or later. Yes, I did. A month ago, right after I left you guys. But I was supposed to get that lot. He was shaking the paper in my face. Dad always said I was supposed to inherit the land. It's a family inheritance. It was deeded to me, Wesley. After your father died, I was the sole owner. But it was an unspoken agreement. Everyone knew the land was meant for me. Your father never told me that, I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. All he said was, "It's your insurance, Ethel, for a rainy day. And you've decided that day is now?" Wesley crumpled the paper in his fist. You sold the family land to rent this shithole and play at independence? I sold the land to be able to start a new life, I replied. And it was my right. Right? He was almost shouting now. What about my rights, my inheritance? Do you have any idea how much that lot is worth now that they're building a mall there? I know exactly how much it's worth. That's why I decided to sell. Enough to give me a secure old age. A secure old age? He laughed. But it wasn't funny. Mom, you spent money on this doghouse when you could live with us for free? Not for free, Wesley. At the cost of my dignity. He tossed the crumpled contract on the table. It's beautiful. Just fine. You destroyed my family, stole my inheritance, all for what? To prove a point? To punish me for one sentence? I didn't destroy anything and I didn't steal anything, I said, feeling tired. I just started living for myself. Maybe it was too late, but better late than never. He headed for the door, but before he left, he turned around. Amanda was right about you. You're not the woman I've known all my life. My mother would never betray her family. The door slammed shut with such force that the glass in the window frame rattled. I slowly sank down onto the couch, feeling my knees shake. Had I betrayed my family? Was my desire to be independent, to live life on my own terms, selfish? I sat like that for what must have been an hour until there was a knock on the door. 3 short knocks, a pause, 2 more. Dexter. Can you let the old man in? He asked when I opened the door. I got bourbon and pizza. Saw your son running out of the house like he was being chased by devils. Thought you might need some company. I smiled through tears I hadn't even noticed. Come on in. We sat on the couch, eating cold pizza and drinking bourbon out of plastic cups. I told Dexter about Wesley's visit, about his demands, about his reaction to the sale of the land. You did the right thing, Dexter said, pouring more bourbon. Both leaving and selling the land. Hell, woman, you've lived for 67 years for other people. You got a right to live a little for yourself. But what if Wesley's right? What if I've ruined the family? If a family falls apart because one of its members starts to respect himself, then that family wasn't worth keeping. I looked at him gratefully. Maybe Dexter was right. Maybe a real family isn't the ones that blood ties you to, but the ones who accept you for who you are, who see you as a person, not a function. The next day, I went to the workshop earlier than usual. My hands needed work. My thoughts needed order. I began restoring an old secretaire that Laureen had brought back from an auction. It was intricate work, lots of little details, hidden drawers, inlays of different types of wood. As I worked, I thought about Wesley's words, his anger, his sense of betrayal, about how easily he'd gone from asking to threatening when he realized he couldn't manipulate me like he used to. I thought about how many years I'd lived my life adjusting to the wishes of others, husband, children, sister-in-law. How many times I'd swallowed resentment, how many times I'd sacrificed my own interests for family well-being. Lauren found me in the workshop in the evening, still working on the secretary. It's 9 o'clock, Ethel, she said. You've been here all day. I'm sorry. I put the tools away. Got carried away. She looked at the secretaire, then at me. It's beautiful work, but I can tell you're upset. Dexter told me about your son. He doesn't understand, I sighed. Maybe he never will. Some people have a hard time accepting that their mother is a separate person with her own wants and needs. Laureen sat down next to me. Especially if that mother has spent her whole life putting their interests ahead of her own. I sold the land he thought was his inheritance. You did the right thing, Lorene shrugged. It was your land, your money. You'd earned it through years of dedication. I nodded, feeling my confidence return to me. Yes, I had a right to make that choice. Right to start a new chapter in my life. You know, Lauren said, looking at the secretary, this old beauty will be worth over $1,000 when you're done, and I already have a potential buyer. So don't worry about the money. You're talented, Ethel, and your talent is appreciated. I smiled, feeling warmed by her words. Maybe Wesley was right about one thing. I had changed, but it was a change for the better. I was getting stronger, more confident, learning to assert my boundaries and my right to happiness. When I got home, I found a note slipped under the door. Wesley's handwriting hurried, curt. The kids miss you. Haley asks if she can come visit you Saturday. I'll bring her by at 2. You. I reread the note several times. No apology, no acknowledgement that I was right. But he was offering to bring Haley. It was a small step, a microscopic concession. Maybe in time we'd find a new way to be a family without manipulation, without suppression, with respect for each other's boundaries. Or maybe we wouldn't, and I was willing to take that risk. Because now I had more than just the role of mother and grandmother. I had a job I loved, friends who valued me, a place I could call my own. I tucked the note away in my desk drawer and walked to the window. Dusk was thickening outside. Lights were on in the neighbors' windows. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing. Life went on, and so did mine. The July heat blanketed Abilene. By day, the asphalt melted beneath my feet, and at night, not even the old fan Dexter had brought me from his endless supply kept me cool. It was hard to work in the workshop in this weather, my hands slippery with sweat, the stain drying too fast. But I didn't complain. The work gave me not only an income, but also meaning, a structure to my days, a sense of my own usefulness. 2 weeks passed after Wesley's visit. As promised, he brought Haley back on Saturday. The meeting was awkward. My granddaughter was embarrassed. Wesley was distant, refused to come in, said he'd be back in 2 hours. Haley and I drank lemonade, and I showed her pictures of the furniture I'd restored. To my surprise, she showed genuine interest. Did you really do this yourself, Grandma? She asked, looking at the pictures. It's so cool. I saw something new in her eyes. Respect. Maybe even admiration. I used to be just an old woman who cooked meals and checked my homework. Now I had become someone interesting, someone who could create beautiful things with her hands. That same evening, a letter arrived. Not an electronic letter, a real paper letter in a stamped envelope. I immediately recognized Tobias's handwriting, neat, with a slight slant to the right. My oldest son had always been pedantic about everything, from school notebooks to business documents. Dear Mom, he wrote, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to let you know about me. I recently learned from Vanessa that you are no longer living with Wesley. She said you had a fight and you moved out. Knowing Wesley's personality, I'm guessing it wasn't an easy fight. Mom, I'm coming to Abilene next Thursday for work. I'll be there for about a week. I'd really like to see you, talk to you. Call me when you get this letter and we'll make an appointment. Love, your son Tobias. I reread the letter several times, trying to catch the intonation between the lines. Tobias had always been the most reserved of my children, the most closed off. He'd left home early. He'd gone to university at 18 and had only come back for holidays and family events ever since. Now he was 49, vice president of some financial company in Chicago, married with 2 children, 19 and 17. Unlike Wesley, Tobias had never been rude to me, but it was hard to call our relationship close. Formal calls on Christmas and Mother's Day, gifts probably picked out by his secretary, the occasional family photo. He was doing his duty as a son, but nothing more. I called him that evening. The conversation was short and businesslike. Yes, he was flying in on Thursday, would be at the hotel around 7 in the evening, could have dinner with me at 8. I agreed without elaborating on the details. There would be plenty of time to talk when I met him. Thursday, I was nervous all day. I messed up the stain on the dresser I was working on twice, and finally, Laureen sent me home. Go get cleaned up before you meet your son, she said. You'll only waste wood in this state. Tobias was waiting for me in the hotel restaurant, a small but pretentious place with white tablecloths and quiet background music. He stood up when he saw me, and once again I was struck by how tall he'd become, almost a head taller than me. As a kid, he'd been the smallest in his class, and the other boys had teased him. Now he towered over most men, tall, trim, with early gray on his temples and wrinkles from the constant strain around his eyes. Mom, he hugged me discreetly, but sincerely. You look beautiful. We ordered dinner and talked for a while about nothing: the weather, his flight, news from Chicago. Finally, when the main courses arrived, Tobias put down his fork and looked at me directly. Mom, what happened between you and Wesley? I sighed. The inevitable question. It's a long story, Tobias. We have time. He leaned back in his chair. I want to know your side of the story. I've already heard it from Wesley. You talked to him? I called him yesterday. He said you abandoned your family over some petty argument, sold Grandpa's lot, and now you're living in the middle of nowhere doing whatever the hell you want. I felt a familiar irritation rising inside. And you believed it. I don't draw conclusions until I've heard both sides. He smiled slightly. A professional habit. And I told him about the years I'd spent in the Wesley house, the constant petty humiliations, the last night my son had said those terrible words to me, about how I'd found the strength to leave, how I'd started a new life, how I'd discovered an unexpected talent for restoration. Tobias listened attentively without interrupting. His face remained impassive, but his eyes, the same gray as his father's, darkened as I spoke. Did he really say to you, just die? Tobias asked when I finished. I nodded. Jesus, he shook his head. I knew he could be harsh, but this... It's not just about the words, Tobias, it's about attitude. The way he looked at me as if I were some kind of defective piece of furniture that was in the way, but I couldn't bear to throw away. Why didn't you call me? Or Vanessa? We could have helped. I looked at him in mild surprise. Would you have helped? Tobias, when was the last time we had a real conversation? Not holiday catchphrases, but a real conversation? He lowered his eyes, and I could see his cheekbones flaring. You're right, he said finally. I was distant, too busy with my life, with my problems. I don't blame you. I touched his arm gently. You have your family, your career, it's natural. No, it's not natural, he looked up, and I saw the pain in his eyes. After your father died, I should have taken more care of you. Make sure you were treated well. But I preferred to pretend everything was okay because it was more convenient. The next day, Tobias came to see me. He looked around my small apartment in silence, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. His face remained impenetrable. It's cozy, he said at last. No need for diplomacy, Tobias, I grinned. I know this isn't a mansion in the suburbs of Chicago. No, I'm serious, he smiled. This place has a sense of you in every detail. He was right. In 2 months, I'd turned a faceless rental apartment into a home. The paintings on the walls are inexpensive prints I found at a thrift store, a bookshelf filled with books from the library and secondhand booksellers. The cacti on the windowsill were the only plants I didn't have to worry about killing with my forgetfulness. The plaid I'd knitted myself from leftover yarn I'd bought at a yard sale. Tobias glanced at the pictures on the dresser, old pictures from my life with Harold. The children small, my husband and I young, smiling. I hardly remember my father like that, Tobias said quietly. In my memory, he is always sick, tired. He was different before his illness. I walked over to my son. Energetic, always with plans, ideas. You're more like him than you realize. We went to Laureen's store. Tobias scrutinized my work, asking questions about restoration techniques, about the origin of the furniture. He seemed genuinely interested, and that warmed my soul. He liked Lauren immediately, her directness, her sharp mind, her independence. They talked at length about business, about marketing, about expansion opportunities. Your mother could make twice as much if we went online, Laureen said. There's a big demand now for authentic restored items among people setting up country homes. But you need a good website, professional photos. I could help with that, Tobias offered. My company has excellent web designers. No need for charity, young man, Laureen grinned. If you want to help your mother, invest in our business. As a partner, not as a son. Tobias laughed. I like you, Mrs. Mayfield. All right, let's discuss the terms of the partnership. I took Tobias to meet Dexter. The old man was his usual self, grouchy, unfriendly, with some snarky remarks. But Tobias didn't take offense. On the contrary, he seemed to appreciate his candor. Your mother's a wonderful woman, Dexter said as we were about to leave. And a damn talented restorer. Take good care of her. I will, Tobias said seriously. That evening, we sat on the porch of my house watching the sun go down. Tobias smoked, a habit he'd picked up in college and never quite kicked, though he'd tried to quit several times. Why didn't you and Wesley ever get along? I asked suddenly. Tobias lingered, looking out at the horizon. It's hard to say. I guess we're too different, I guess. We always have been. He's emotional, I'm rational. He lives in the present, I'm always looking to the future. But it's more than that, isn't it? I insisted. There's always been some, tension. Tobias was silent for so long that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he put out his cigarette and turned to me. Wesley always thought I was your favorite, he said quietly. That you loved me more than him and Vanessa. What? I was genuinely surprised. But I don't. I know. Tobias smiled weakly. But he believed it. Maybe because I was older and you had higher expectations of me, or because I was more like you in appearance. I don't know. But he was always competing with me for your attention, and he always thought he was losing. I shook my head, trying to make sense of this information. Did Wesley really think I loved him less? Was that the root of his resentment, his rudeness? It got worse after Dad died, Tobias continued. Wesley decided he was the man of the house. Remember how he insisted you move in with him when he sold our old house? How he said he'd take care of you? I think it was a way for him to prove that he could be a good son too. That he was worthy of your love too. But I never doubted that, I whispered. I loved you all equally. Mom, Tobias took my hand. You were the perfect mother, always putting us first, always sacrificing your own interests for ours. Maybe a little too much, so much so that we started to take it for granted, especially Wesley. We sat in silence for a long time, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. Finally, Tobias asked, What about Wesley now? Is he really in debt? I shuddered. How do you know? Tobias sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose, a gesture he'd learned from his father. He called me a few months ago, asking for a loan. I gave him some, but warned him it was the last time. He promised to pay me back when he sold Grandpa's lot. I froze. He said he was going to sell the lot? Yes, Tobias looked at me carefully. He said that you and he discussed it, that you agreed to sign the land over to him. That's not true, I shook my head. We never talked about it. He just thought it would automatically go to him. I see. Tobias pressed his lips together. Then his current behavior becomes more understandable. He was counting on the money to pay off his debts. But why didn't he tell me? Didn't explain the situation? Pride? Shame? Tobias shrugged. Or just a habit of thinking everyone owed him without having to ask. The next day, when I arrived at the workshop, Laureen gave me the news. Your son called, the youngest. Wesley? I raised my eyebrows in surprise. You? Yeah, imagine that, she grinned. He found the store's number online, asked if you were working today. I said I was. I thought he might stop by. Why? I don't know. He sounded, weird, not aggressive, more like desperate. I remembered what Tobias had told me about Wesley's financial problems. Maybe things had gotten worse? Wesley showed up around noon. He was alone, without the kids, and he looked gaunt, tired. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. Mom, he said, shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot. Can I talk to you? Alone? Laureen, who was watching us from the other end of the store, nodded at me. Use the back room. I'll make sure you're not disturbed. We walked to the small room that served as Laureen's office. Wesley sat in a chair, hunched over and staring at the floor. Tobias is here, he said without preamble. Did he tell you? About what? About my problems. I nodded. About your debts? Yeah, I did. Wesley sighed, rubbing his face with his hands. I'm in deep shit, Mom. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the house if I don't make the payments by the end of the month. Amanda won't come back until I solve the financial problems. I could lose the business. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. Mom, he finally looked up at me. I know I have no right to ask. I know I've behaved, not in the best way. But I need your help. The money from the estate sale. Some of it would save me. This is it. The real reason for his visit. How much? I asked. 30,000, he said quickly, like he was afraid he'd change his mind. That's a quarter of what you got for the lot. I'll pay you back, I swear. As soon as I get back on my feet. I was silent, staring at my son. This wasn't how I'd envisioned our reconciliation, not by asking for money. Wesley, I began carefully, this money is my insurance, my future. I know, Mom. He clenched his fists. But it's my future, too. Your grandchildren's future. If I lose my house, my business, what about my kids? And if I give you the money, what happens to me? I asked you straight out. You talk about repayment, but we both know that's unlikely. You didn't count on that money as a loan, but as an inheritance that you would have received in advance. He jumped up, his face contorted. What do you want me to say? That I screwed up? That I'm a bad businessman, a bad father, a bad son? Yes, all of those things are true. I screwed it all up. Happy? I don't want you to humiliate yourself, Wesley. I stood up, looking him in the eye. I want you to finally see me, not as an ATM, not as a free babysitter, not as a convenient adjunct to your life, but as a person, as your mother who loves you but isn't ready to be used anymore. He froze, looking at me in surprise. It had been a week since I'd talked to Wesley. I made my terms. I'd give him $15,000, not 30 as he'd asked for, but not for nothing. I insisted on a formal loan agreement, with interest and a repayment schedule. Tobias, who was still in town, helped draw up the paperwork. Wesley agreed reluctantly, muttering something about mistrust in the family, but signed whatever was required. Tobias left, promising to come back more often and to call every week. He kept his promise. His calls became part of my Sunday rituals. We talked about work, about the weather, about his kids, sometimes about Wesley. Our relationship changed, became more open, more honest. I continued to work in the workshop. Business was going well. Laureen said my work was becoming more and more in demand. She even suggested I participate in a small exhibition of antique furniture that a local gallery was planning. Think about bringing something special, she said. Something that would showcase your talent to the fullest. I pondered this suggestion, going over in my mind the things I'd been working on. Perhaps the secretary I'd recently finished, or a bureau with a retractable tabletop that I was in the process of restoring. One day while I was working in the workshop, the bell above the store door jingled. I didn't notice. Laureen usually greeted the customers herself, but a few minutes later she came in to see me. You have visitors, she said with a slight smile. Your family. I walked out into the store, wiping my hands on my apron. Wesley was standing in the window looking at an antique clock. Next to him were Josh and Haley, my grandchildren. They'd grown considerably in the time I hadn't seen them. Josh has grown, looking even more like his father. Haley has curled her hair and dyed the ends purple. Grandma! Haley rushed to me, hugging me with unexpected strength. We missed you so much. I missed you too, sweetie. I hugged her back, then turned to Josh. Hello, Josh. He nodded, smiling awkwardly. Hi, Grandma. We thought we'd stop by and check on you, Wesley said, stepping closer. The kids have been asking for a long time. I looked at my son closely. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him, less exhausted, though still tense. It's good to see you, I said sincerely. Would you like some tea? There's a kettle in the workshop. Can I watch you work? Josh asked with sudden interest. Sure, I smiled. Come on. We went into the workshop. The kids were curious about the tools, the blanks, the jars of stain and varnish. Wesley stood a little apart, watching us with an incomprehensible expression on his face. Did you do all this yourself? Josh asked, running his hand over the surface of the bureau I was restoring. Yeah, I nodded. Do you like it? It's cool. He looked impressed. Is it hard to learn? Not if you have patience and attention to detail. Maybe you could show Josh some simple techniques. Wesley intervened. He could do with learning to work with his hands. I looked at my grandson. Do you want to try? He nodded, and I gave him the sandpaper and showed him how to sand the wood properly, following the direction of the fibers. Haley wanted to try it too. Soon they were working enthusiastically under my supervision while I made tea. Wesley came up to me while the kids were busy. You look good, Mom, he said quietly. This job is obviously good for you. Thank you. I handed him a cup of tea. How are you doing? Did the money help? Yes, I was able to make a deal with the bank. He sipped his tea. Amanda and the kids came home a week ago. That's good to hear. We were quiet for a moment, watching Josh and Haley. They were laughing, showing each other something in the wood. Mom, Wesley began cautiously, I've been thinking about our conversation, about what you said, that I never saw you as a person, just a convenient adjunct to my life. I waited in silence for him to continue. Maybe you're right, he sighed. I'm used to you always being there for me, always ready to help. I never thought about what it cost you, that you might have your own desires, your own plans. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from Wesley. I nodded, accepting his words. Thanks for helping with the money, he continued. I know you could have said no, and you had every right to. You're my son, Wesley, no matter what. He stepped awkwardly from foot to foot. The kids really miss you. They're asking when you're coming back. That's it. The real reason they're here. I'm not coming back, Wesley, I said softly but firmly. I have my own life now. But Mom, he lowered his voice, glancing at the children. They need a grandmother. Amanda works full-time, and so do I. They need someone at home. They need a grandmother, not a housekeeper and a babysitter. I shook my head. I'd love to see them. They can come visit me on the weekends. I can pick them up from school sometimes. But I won't live in your house and be completely responsible for your children. He tensed, and I saw the jaundice set in his cheekbones, a sign of restrained anger. Mom, be realistic. This independence game. How long will it last? A year? 2? And then? You're getting older. Sooner or later, you'll need help, care. Maybe, I agreed. But when that time comes, I'll hire a caregiver or move into a nursing home. I don't want to be a burden on my kids. A burden? He looked at me with genuine surprise. You've never been a burden, Mom. I haven't? I grinned. How about just die? I don't care. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I apologize for that. How many times do I have to tell you I didn't mean it? It's not about apologizing, Wesley. It's about the fact that those words could even cross your mind. It's about the fact that somewhere deep down inside you really thought it at that moment. The kids had finished sanding and were now looking at other items in the workshop with interest. Haley had found an antique music box that I had recently restored and was now listening to the melody, looking mesmerized at the spinning ballerina. Wesley noticed that the kids weren't paying attention to us and turned to me again. Okay, Mom, let's be honest, he said with a hint of irritation. What do you want? More money? A room of your own instead of a closet? A weekend away? Tell me, and we'll make a deal. I'm not bargaining, Wesley, I shook my head. It's not a matter of terms. It's a matter of self-respect. I've finally found a place where I feel needed, valued, where I'm respected not only as a mother or grandmother, but as a person with my own talents and interests. I wouldn't trade that for being a servant in your house, no matter what terms you offer. A servant? His face contorted with anger. You were family. Are you two fighting again? Josh asked, coming toward us. Is it about money? No, not about money. I put my hand on his shoulder. It's just different ways of looking at life. Kids, wait for us at the store, Wesley said in a strained voice. Grandma and I need to finish talking. Josh and Haley reluctantly left the shop. When the door closed behind them, Wesley turned to me with a determined look. Look, Mom, I realize that I hurt you, that I haven't been not the most attentive son, but I'm trying to make amends. I'm trying to make things right. And it's like you're, punishing me. I'm not punishing you, Wesley. I shook my head. I'm just not letting you decide how I live my life anymore. And if that sounds like punishment to you, well, that says a lot about our situation, doesn't it? He clenched his fists. and for a moment I thought he was about to pound the table. But instead he took a deep breath, clearly trying to pull himself together. Okay, he said finally. You don't want to go back. I get it. But the kids, they need their grandmother. I already told you I'll see them. I can take them on weekends if you want. I can help with homework, take them to classes, but on my terms, at my convenience. Not as an obligation, but as a grandmother who loves her grandchildren. Wesley looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. Maybe it was the first time he'd ever seen a woman with her own will and desires, rather than a mother who would do anything for him. You've changed, he said quietly. No, Wesley, I've always been like this. I just finally found the courage to show it. He nodded as if accepting defeat. Okay, your terms. How about picking up the kids on Saturdays, morning to night? Amanda could bring them. Deal. I held out my hand, and after a second pause, he shook it. We walked out to the store where Josh and Haley were looking at antiques under Laureen's watchful eye. Kids, we have to go, Wesley said. Grandma will be picking you up on Saturdays from now on. You'll be spending time with her. Really? Haley brightened up. That's great. Can I help you with the furniture? Sure, I smiled, if you want. Can you teach me? Josh asked, trying to hide his interest behind a fake indifference. I'd love to, I patted his shoulder. You have good hands. I think you'd make a great restorer. When they left, Laureen came over to me. Is everything okay? Yeah, I nodded. I think we finally found a compromise. Compromise is good, she grinned, as long as it doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for others again. No, I shook my head. No more sacrifices, just an honest relationship on equal footing. The next weeks flew by. I worked on the bureau for the exhibit and picked up my grandchildren on Saturdays. To my surprise, both Josh and Haley showed a genuine interest in restoration. We worked together on small projects, jewelry boxes, picture frames. Sometimes Dexter would join us, showing the kids the tricks of the woodworking trade. Wesley kept his distance. He didn't pick up the kids himself. Amanda dropped them off and picked them up. We exchanged short messages, mostly about schedules and plans. Not intimacy, but not open hostility either. More like armed neutrality. Tobias called every Sunday. There was a new depth, a sincerity to our conversations. He talked about work, about his children, sometimes about his fears and hopes. I shared with him my projects, my plans, my thoughts. He promised to come to the exhibition, and I believed he would keep his word. I still hadn't heard from Vanessa. Tobias said she was very busy at her new job, that the move to Seattle was more difficult than they had expected. I missed my daughter, my twin grandchildren, but I didn't intrude. She had her own life, her own problems. The day of the exhibit was approaching. I'd chosen a restored late 19th century bureau to display an intricate piece with lots of detail, inlay, secret drawers. Laureen said it was my best project, a real work of art. Are you nervous? Dexter asked me the night before the exhibit. We were sitting on the porch watching the sun go down, our daily ritual. A little, I admitted. I never thought I'd be exhibiting at 67, that someone would be judging my work. People will love it, he chuckled. I know they will. I've seen you work. You put a piece of your soul into every piece. How poetic for an old grump, I smiled. Hey, I can be poetic when I want to be, he frowned pretend. I just don't usually want to be. We laughed, and I caught myself thinking about how much my life had changed over the months. New house, new friends, new job, a new me. The show was at a small gallery in downtown Abilene. In addition to me, several other local artists participated. A wood carver, a glass artist, a ceramicist. Laureen helped set up my booth, arranging the furniture I'd restored over the past few months. Dexter arrived first, awkwardly holding a bouquet of wildflowers. For the master restorer, he said, handing me the flowers, from an admirer of her talent. Thank you. I felt my cheeks warm with embarrassment. Then Tobias arrived on the morning flight, straight from a business meeting in Dallas. He looked at my work for a long time, asking questions about technique and materials. In his eyes, I could see the sincere admiration. Mom, this is amazing, he said, looking at the bureau. I never realized you were so talented. Thank you, I smiled. I didn't realize it myself. To my surprise, Amanda and the kids showed up. Wesley wasn't there. She said he had an emergency at the car dealership. I was glad for that. His presence would have created tension on this important day for me. People came up, looking at my work, asking questions. Many expressed surprise to learn that I had been doing restoration work for less than a year. A few people left orders. Through Lauren, of course. Toward evening, when the flow of visitors began to thin, Laureen came up to me with a glass of champagne. "Here's to a successful debut," she said, clinking glasses with me. "A collector from Austin bought your bureau for very good money." "Really?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Really," she grinned. "I told you you had talent. You could open your own workshop, you know. I know a guy who rents out space on Oak Street. It's a nice place, cheap." "Your own studio?" I shook my head. "I don't know, Laureen. It's a big step." "Think about it." She squeezed my shoulder. "You're ready, Ethel, more than you think." I looked around the gallery. Tobias was talking to the exhibit organizer, gesturing enthusiastically. Dexter was explaining something to Josh and Haley, pointing at the details of the bureau. Amanda was examining the small table I'd restored as one of the first. My new family, not just by blood, but by choice. The phone in my pocket vibrated. I pulled it out, expecting to see a message from Wesley, maybe congratulations on a successful exhibition. But no, the name on the screen made me freeze. Vanessa. "Mom, it's me. Tobias told me about the exhibit. Congratulations, I'd like to talk, if it's okay with you. We're flying to Abilene next week, me and the twins. Can we see each other?" I reread the message several times, feeling my heart fill with warmth. Vanessa. My daughter, who always avoided conflict, always tried to please everyone, who didn't pick sides in the fight between me and Wesley. Now she wanted to talk, made the first move. I looked at my grandchildren, at Dexter, at Laureen, at Tobias, at the people who saw me not only as a mother and grandmother, but as a human being with her own talents, dreams, weaknesses. Maybe Vanessa was starting to see me in a new way too. Maybe our relationship could change too, become deeper, more honest. I started typing my answer.